Welcome to QI, the panel show where fortune favours the brains. Tonight's show is all about luck and loss. So without further ado, let's meet our lucky losers. The fortunate Sandy Toksvig. The fortuitous Danny Baker. The jammy Jeremy Clarkson. And Mr. Jinx, the Jonah Allen Davies. Now, I'm afraid your buzzers are a bit of a lottery, so Sandy goes...
Release the balls.
Danny goes...
No more bets, please.
That sounded like you, didn't it? Yeah. Jeremy goes...
I've literally no idea what that was.
I think that was a jackpot. Yeah. Now, Alan goes... Now, being as this is the Lucky Losers show, whoever gets the lowest score wins.
Well done, Alan. Well done already. Congratulations.
So, what you have to do, obviously, is try and collect as many klaxons as you can.
Oh.
And that's going to be interesting, we hope. Oh. Quite interesting. Fingers on the buzzers. Here's your first chance. What is the oldest you can be on a Club 18 to 30 holiday?
No more bets, please.
Yeah.
30.
Very well done. You've got the idea. There's the klaxon. But anyone like to have a go at the right answer? What do you imagine is, in fact, the right answer? We won't punish you for that.
Surely there's some leeway. Those ladies look a little over 30.
Is it sort of mid-20s? Are they actually... Is it the other one?
They should put it down the other way. No, it is a little bit older than 30.
35.
173.
173. That's very good.
Is it 31?
No, it's 36, rather bizarre. Well, the oldest you can leave the country with a Club 18 to 30 ticket in is 35, but you might have your birthday while on the holiday. So
is there not a degree of sadness in your life if you decide to spend your 36th birthday on an 18 to 30 holiday?
That woman on the left just turned 36. In terms of... I'm so sorry, I've got to go now.
Yep, there you go. In theory, you could celebrate your 36th birthday on a Club 18 to 30 holiday. So, what is the youngest you can be?
No more bets,
yeah, yeah. Whoa!
18.
Oh, he gets so fussy, doesn't he?
I'll have to win.
Have another go.
Well, clearly they're keen on that margin of error.
Yeah.
There's clearly some margin of error, so it can't surely be the same margin. It can't be 6 years, it can't be the...
No, it wouldn't be 6. That would be awful.
12 to 36.
It's a recipe.
Perfect match.
I'm on the phone to Operation U-Tree as we speak. No.
Well, it can't be much more. It's 16 or 17.
17 is the right answer.
Oh. I'm winning now, so therefore I'm losing. Oh.
Yeah.
Do you remember they had rather dodgy slogans when they... do you remember any of them that were caused...
You will get fucked.
Yeah. Would you like to catch chlamydia?
Both carnally and financially. Well, no, it wasn't quite as on the nose as that. It was... Beaver Hispania.
Oh.
Oh, God. I know. It's not all sex, sex, sex. There's some sun and sea as well.
Oh, dear.
I know.
It really puts you off, doesn't it? Chlamydia, I think, is a very good...
You know, there's no symptoms when you have chlamydia. So if someone says, how are you? You say, oh, very well. That means you almost certainly have it.
It's the perfect disease.
It is, but I don't... So I never know how anyone goes to the doctors with it. It would be quite interesting to find out.
So there are no warts, there's no weeping...
No green discharge.
nice to be frank about these things.
Absolutely fine. Go to the doctors, you'll have chlamydia. It's baffling, and koalas all have it.
Do they?
Yeah, all got
How do you
chlamydia.
know that?
This is
That's that
anything.
in general conversation. Koalas
That's
have
what
all got
koala is all
chlamydia.
about.
Huge problem in Australia. They've all got chlamydia and
I
they're
thought
dying.
maybe it was an add-on to an 1830 Australian holiday. If you didn't get lucky, there's always the koalas.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Well, according to the official rules on their website, a 17-year-old can go to a, as it turns out, rather misnamed Club 18 to 30 holiday. Now, a question especially for Alan to lose points with in this Lucky Losers show. Which mammal has the most cells in its body?
Blue whale.
It does. And you get a lot of points for that. It's the blue whale bonus, and you get points. And what do points mean?
Right,
Bad surprises. Yeah. No, it does indeed have the most cells because it's the largest animal. And the larger the animal, the more the cells. But you can claw your way back if you could tell me to the nearest trillion how many cells a human being has. It's a certain trillion.
2.
Oh, it's a bit more than that. It's 30 trillion. Is it? Yeah.
What if you were a fat blue whale? Then you'd have more.
Well, no, that's a human I'm talking about. A blue whale would be 2,000 times more cells.
Oh, I see.
So you would think, because it has more cells, that blue whales would have more cancers, or at least have a greater number of them, because it has so many more cells. And in fact, it has fewer than we do. And nobody knows why.
Well, it doesn't smoke. I can't. It's obvious reason.
There is that. But it's known as Peto's paradox.
Do they die of cancer, whales?
All mammals can get it. People who've had cats and dogs will know it's a very sad thing. But, you know, all animals get cancer. So.
Oh.
So 5 points available, 5 minus points, I should say. If you can tell me what species of whale that is there.
Blue.
It's not a blue, actually. We should have offered you a blue, but in fact that is a...
Is it a sperm?
No, sperm are the ones with a big
Hump.
fin. It's a hump. It's a humper. Yeah, humpback.
A sperm's got the big head that
Yes,
fills...
huge, filled with
stuff.
spermaceti, yes, with a milky substance in its head. But to this day, we don't know what it uses it for. It's the general theory is it's something to do with the huge depths it goes down to. And it was used by NASA because it kept its viscosity in minus 400 degrees of incredibly cold temperatures. It was the same viscosity. Nothing replaced it. But it was basically the whole of the Industrial Revolution ran on whale oil. And if it weren't for John D. Rockefeller cracking crude oil into petroleum and various other, forms like paraffin and so on, the whales would have unquestionably been extinct.
So petrol saved the whale.
It did. Petrol
As
saved
I've
the
been
whale.
saying
It's so...
for many
It's one of the great ironies of history. It's true. I thought that would please you somehow.
It's enormously pleased.
You'd rather be a petrol head than a sperm head. Still, as it is the largest...
I'd take all the compliments you can get, Terry.
Now, before we continue, I should let you know that as this is the L series, one of the questions coming up will have a lavatorial theme. The answer will be wholly lavatorial. And if it is, you can ask if you can spend your penny, right?
So if
you
it's
think...
a lavatory question, I'll bring that out.
Yeah.
Right.
And you get extra points. That's right. So anyway, moving on. Which good cause benefited from Britain's first lottery?
Dale Winton. Dale Winton's tanning salon.
I'm sure it did very well.
Yeah, there you go.
But it wasn't Britain's first lottery.
Is it the Bank of England?
No, that's a very good point. That was almost like a lottery.
Yeah.
Shares were issued to raise money. And
For the army,
virtually, yes, it was virtually like a lottery. But this one was similarly to raise money for a military venture, or at least for a military, perhaps for defence, originally.
With Drake?
Yes, it was indeed in 1567.
It was Drake.
So, well, it was, yeah, it was...
Armada.
Doing in my
It
head.
was, yeah.
in my head.
I'm very impressed. It was Queen Elizabeth and her navy, and indeed Drake was one of her leading figures. There she is. It was. She realised that should King Philip of Spain send the fleet, which in Spanish is
Armada?
Armada, yes.
I'm genuinely still reeling from the fact that's in my head.
It's really great when that happens, isn't it?
No, it's odd. It's real weird.
And so she thought to raise money, she'd try and get those who could afford it to buy lottery tickets, and the prize would be enormous. And the money raised would be enormous. Now, What do you think the average wage was per year?
It can't have been much.
No, it wasn't much. The average annual income in 1600 was about £9.
Oh.
So tickets were 50 pence, we've called it now, 10 shillings each, which is about 3 weeks' wages.
Yeah.
So only the rich would be able to.
Only the rich would be able to. The prize on there was £5,000, 5,000 then pounds,
Yeah.
which is millions today.
Buy America.
You buy a huge estate. Plus, it was paid partly in cash, but also in gold and silver and fine tapestry and fabrics, and something really extraordinary to encourage sales. And this later cropped up in one of the most popular games in our culture as something that you could tuck away under the board of the game for future
Monopoly, a
use.
get-out-of-jail-free card.
You've got a get-out-of-jail-free card for anything except murder, serious felonies, treason, and
parking.
Yeah. Parking your horse, obviously, that was not allowed. Or piracy, that was one. But everything else was, yeah, very good,
That
wasn't
would
it?
sell tickets now.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant idea.
I learnt about the Mary Rose. Do you want to know about the Mary Rose?
Tell me about the Mary Rose.
Mary Rose sank because they didn't close the cannon portholes. And they let off a broadside and it tipped back in the water all winter.
All shipped every...
500 men on board. And it
Well,
went
and they drowned because they'd put the netting across the deck to prevent people
Prevent
boarding
people
the
getting
boat,
on
and they
board.
were unable to get
they
off.
couldn't get out.
And I have to say, the Mary Rose Museum, which is in Portsmouth, is one of the single best museums I've ever been. It's only just opened. And there was some controversy about it because they were able to resurrect skeletons and using forensic artists show us pictures of what they actually look like. You can stand and look the cook in the face.
Oh, my
It is the
goodness.
most astonishing thing, and see all his things. And what I love is that even though they were going to war and they were fighting and so on, they had violins and they had chessboards and they had dice and they wanted to play games as well. So I love the fact that, you know, they must have been having a laugh and enjoying themselves apart from... it was such a tragic end, but it's the most amazing time capsule of that period because the ship sank with everything there.
It is an amazing
Well,
thing.
I'm going to go.
It's
Yeah.
It's well worth its visit.
I think, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's go all go to... Very good. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. So, the good cause in the first national lottery was beating out the Spanish. What did newsagents sell that makes people suddenly want to vote Tory?
Is it going to be the Daily Mail?
Makes me want to vote communist.
Will you get one for the Daily Telegraph as well?
You probably might. Yeah! He's clawing his way back to victory. No, this is a very odd thing, but newsagents sell
What
them.
about the Sun?
This is not a newspaper, I would now say, but it's something newsagents sell.
They sell something that makes you want to vote Conservative.
Well, it does if things turn out well after you've bought this particular item.
OK.
So we're really back to the last question.
Is it a lottery ticket?
It's a lottery ticket. If you win the lottery, many Labour voters who won the lottery said they changed their mind and were now Tory voters.
What a depressing comment on humanity.
It is a bit Perhaps even more depressing is that the American therapists have a name for the syndrome, which is sudden wealth syndrome, which is presumably what they suffer from whenever they name a syndrome. They make money by deciding you have a syndrome.
That's a really boring name for it, though. Couldn't
Sudden
they come up with
wealth.
something
You'd
else?
think so, yeah. But these are the same people who said that if you lose someone you love, they die, and you are still...
Wow, that was
So impressive.
The day had to happen.
That was an explosion.
You're right.
There are people in California now looking at their seismographs going, what is that?
Is that because I said the word die? No, don't do it again.
So sorry for
Sorry, no, it's fine. It was a revolting thing about psychologists who basically said that if someone you love dies and you're still inconsolable with grief 6 months later, that is a mental condition. It's not
What's that called? Just 6 months later,
it's called,
dead
it's
person
called
syndrome?
grieving. It's called grieving. It is perfectly reasonable. In fact,
I think a syndrome I read of recently is, you know, when you come at the pictures and you sneeze, do you do that when you go from a dark thing or look at the sun?
yes, or look
You
at the
get
sun,
that.
yeah.
It's got a real fancy name now.
I've never sneezed when walking through the dark. Is that not?
You don't suffer from it. Don't mock people.
you
who
don't
do.
go, presumably, you don't go to matinees. You go to evening performances. So it comes out and it's dark, but it's from the dark into the light.
It's a syndrome. It's a real syndrome.
We've got the name in front of me. Look, my elves have been busily hacking away. It's called autosomal dominant compelling heliophthalmic outburst.
There you go.
I want to have him round for dinner.
For short, it's called Achu syndrome. But we're still with lotteries. This is more astonishing. I mean, what a coincidence. In 2001, guess who won the Zimbabwe Banking Corporation's jackpot?
No. Mugabe.
It was Robert Mugabe. What are the odds against that? I mean...
Wow, lucky man.
Yeah, lucky. Anyway, less fortunate was Clarence Inaction Jackson. The name tells it all. He won, in 1995, $5.8 million on the Connecticut lottery.
Oh.
And
didn't get it?
Failed to turn up.
Pick it up?
The collect-by date passed, and they wouldn't pay out. He tried to sue, and he lost. Very sad. And there was a woman in 1980 called Maureen Wilcox who chose the correct winning numbers for both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Unfortunately, she
was burned as a witch.
No, she played the Massachusetts numbers in Rhode Island.
No, the odds against that was just 30 trillion to 1.
Quite. Anyway, yes, lottery winners tend to turn right after collecting their winnings. What's the most disgusting thing a Liberal-Tory coalition has ever done?
Well, I think you've got the photo right there. So much choice. I guess it's not this Liberal.
It's not this, it's the Liberal Party rather than the Liberal Democratic Party, which is the Lib Dems.
Is it Whiggery? Is it...
It's not Whiggery, it's later than that. 100 years later, roughly. 1890s,
Is
in
it
fact.
something to do with sewers?
It's in your favourite city, Birmingham, where the bull ring is. It's not sewers.
Is it something to do with Thomas Crapper?
No, it's nothing to do with it. It's not spend a penny
It's not.
answer. It's eating something in public.
In Birmingham?
In Birmingham.
A Liberal person ate something in Birmingham in the 1850s.
A group of Liberal
It's getting
people.
closer and closer.
It was a scandal that rocked the nation. It wasn't dog shit. It was
A dog.
A dog.
Oh.
They ate a dog. Not only did they celebrated their victory in a council election.
That was not a real headline.
No, we did. we did mock that one up, I grant you. But the top bit is correct. Birmingham Gazette, proprietors Birmingham Gazette Limited, largest sale with one exception of any provincial morning newspaper. I love that, with one exception. I'll grant you that, yes, there is one exception.
Why don't they just put second last?
Birmingham, the largest. So they ate this dog. Not only that, they hanged and roasted it, and portions of the dog's limbs were used to create fun by some of the men rubbing them over the faces of their companions. But a few days later, the Birmingham Gazette was scooped by the Birmingham Post, still going, I think, which revealed that one of the men involved was a Tory. So, in fact, it was a coalition disgrace.
Why did they do this?
To celebrate. They were obviously drunk, I suspect. They were councillors who had won a
But
victory.
there's drunk and there's...
That's really unpleasant.
I've been drunk many times, and I've never looked at my dogs.
Or your neighbour's dogs.
You've had a kebab, come on.
Did you know that how disgusted you feel about something, so how disgusted you might feel about somebody eating a dog, will reflect on your political inclinations? So Conservative people are more likely to feel repulsed by things than Liberals. And it's something to do with your physical reaction to something, so it'll tell you something about what kind of political persuasion you are.
That's how I know I'm so liberal. Because I'll eat anything. You've never eaten a dog there? That's very odd.
No. Well, they're
As far
like
as you
most
know.
meat eaters, they're not very tasty.
Well, you shouldn't eat anything that's more than 2 from the sun, anyway, and a dog eats meat, so you shouldn't really
Exactly,
eat it.
meat eaters are not good. I mean, those who do eat meat, they eat vegetarians. We eat cows and sheep.
You're a vegetarian, aren't you?
I ate fish.
I could still eat you. Technically, I could eat you.
Yeah. I'd leave the
I think we'd
hair.
have to have a vote.
Now, this next question is even more incomprehensible than usual, so I thought I'd spice things up by getting you all to wear hats. Could you pass that to Jeremy? And you can have that. And yours, you'll notice, says leader. And you can
I have
a
the
fez.
largest head
Thank
in the
There,
world. It
and
won't
you can have a
notice.
nice straw bow trim. It's extraordinary. You do have a large head.
Enormous head.
Elmer Fudd.
I saw Bob Dylan in concert
Did you well?
at the O2 Arena.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have screens on, so you can't, you know, he's this size. And he wore a 10-gallon hat for the whole thing, and he never spoke. So it could have been anyone.
Right, OK, here we go with this question. What do Amy Freeze and Larry Sprinkle have in common with Dee Whedon and A.J. Splat?
Is this some
Are these
dark
real
part
people?
of the internet?
It's a real thing. It's not a dark part of the internet. it's a joyous part of real life.
They're real people.
Whedon and Splat are both Australian urologists. And in other words, they cover splatting and being weed on. Well, not necessarily being weed on. But sorry. And Amy Freeze and Larry Sprinkle are American
Chefs.
Antifreeze manufacturers.
Ice cream.
Garden sprinkler.
meteorologists, weather forecasters. So it freezes, you get a sprinkle of rain.
I believe that's their real name.
It really is. Now, what is the name for people having jobs that come after their names? So if you were a baker... say.
Yes, exactly. I don't know the term.
My dad was a clerk.
And your dad, exactly, that would do it.
Yeah.
It's called nominative determinism.
It's called nominative or onomastic determinism because it's you're determined by your name.
I've always been interested by this because there was a family many, many years ago and they were called the Gauntlets. And they christened their son Victor.
I knew Victor. He ran Aston Martin.
Exactly. He was destined to run Aston Martin simply because his parents had christened him Victor. If they'd called him Stan, he would have been a plumber. You see it all the time, where somebody called Fotherington's Major Fortescue has always got a sandwich shop in Fulham, whereas somebody called Ron Twat is from somewhere. And it's very simple names tend to...
I know Ron Twat.
Pretty good builder.
Surely Ron Twat should be a gynaecologist. Surely.
Now you can see...
Dennis Norton, when he used to write with Frank Muir, when they were writing their scripts, they used to get bored and come up with improbable TV shows. And the best one was, by day, she dispensed justice on the streets of LA. By night, she was queen of the music halls. Join us at 8 for Tara Raboom, DA.
Tara Raboom, DA. Oh, that's brilliant. I love it.
That was my favourite one of those.
Well, some examples you might know. They're called aptronyms as well because they're apt nyms. Mark Avery, where would he work?
Well,
no, that's too specific.
Cambridge.
He's of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, yes, very good. The poet Wordsworth, when you think about it, he went to Cambridge to read mathematics, and he probably thought, well, I'm called Wordsworth. Words.
Stephen, why am I wearing this hat?
Well, you'll see. You're the leader. You've got to have a way of indicating your leadership, and you're the leader.
I did a programme years ago sailing around Britain with John McCarthy, and we had to go and be fitted for life jackets, at Crusader life jackets, and they were fitted, and I promise you I've still got his card, by a man called Will Drown.
It's just fantastic. It's just bliss when it happens. Well, you've rather beaten mine. My rather sorry lot left. I mean, Danone UK, the managing director, is called Bruno Fromage. You probably remember the former Lord Chief Justice was called Lord
Judge.
Lord Judge. I mean, that really is pretty straightforward, isn't it?
What is Fry, darling? What is it? Is it
the Fries? Yeah, well, it was a Bristol chap, and chapess, it's a very famous chapess. She was on our £5 note until very recent.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Fry. And she was a Gurney, and the Fries were Fries, and they were both Quaker families, as many of the chocolatiers were.
Were you plagued at school by people saying Turkish
of course,
delight?
Fry, Turkish delight, keeps you up at the night.
Happy days.
Pleasant, comestible.
You try Dan, the laboratory man, washed his hair with a frying pan, combed his hair with a leg of a chair. Dan, an old Danny boy. There's certain songs that do curse you through your life if you have a certain name.
I just got, what sort of a fucking name is Jeremy?
Just a couple of nominative determinism facts. One is this fellow called Robert Lane, who was a New Yorker who, for various reasons, decided to give his sixth child the name Winner, and his seventh and last child, rather unkindly, Loser. Some kind of extraordinary experiment, but it at least reversed the effect you might expect. And Loser Lane, known as Lou, went on to become a pillar of the NYPD and probably arresting his older brother, Winner, who was arrested for burglary more than 30 times. So it didn't work at all. Now, if I told you that two of our biggest fans are called Joyce Baker and Amanda Pastry, what do you think you might have handed out to you?
Is it cake?
Well, it's not cake, actually. It's biscuits, so you can help yourself. You have to eat them all.
Well, it's nice, but mildly disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to eat them. This is all part of the experiment that you eat me up. Did it yours?
Okay.
The third one has to go, and Alan's taken the third one, and that's the important thing. Because he's got the word leader on it, this happens in experiment after experiment with human beings. If you tell someone they're the leader, and you give them three of something, an odd number, with an even number of people, the leader is basically always takes.
Well, it's a bit like my father once went out for tea with somebody, and 2 cakes were delivered. One was very small, one was very large. And the chap just leant over and took the large one, and my dad said, if that had been me and I went first, I would have taken the small one. He said, well, you've got it anyway, so what are you complaining about?
That's so logical. It's brilliant.
I think boys and girls have a very different way of doing this. I was once at a party, and they were handing out things on the slate they seem to do nowadays with canapés.
Yes.
And there were
Slate
2 small canapés on this piece of slate, and there were 3 of us. And all 3 of us went, no, that's very kind. Thank you, like that. And as we were saying it, a man walked past, picked up one canapé, put it on top of the other, and ate them both.
Excellent. So he ate the other one, not just because he's Alan Davis.
But because he's got leader, and he felt like somehow it was just put into his brain that he was the leader, and he would have that. It's not behavioural. Behavioural sciences.
I was looking forward to that bit.
Hand in your plates.
It doesn't help that I forgot I'd got leader on my hat.
Yeah. Oh, well, you forgot you were the leader. That really doesn't help.
No.
No.
I'll eat those as well, if you like.
What? Right, so, skimming on. What did lucky old Edward VII use this for?
Oh, I say.
I say lucky, I mean, it's extraordinary.
Oh, God.
What do we know about it? No, quite wrong. He didn't poo on yellow silk.
No, I thought
You thought it lifted up into
it was
his...
Mark Commode. Yes, I did.
It's sexual of some kind of
It was sexual, yeah.
It's sexual, and I'm not going to say it on television, frankly. I'll just be in trouble.
Well, no, you won't. I mean, it's not... I mean, it's...
Well, I will a bit.
Yeah.
For what I've got in mind, if I I guess a young lady sits on the top bit, and he's not on the... He's elsewhere.
Well, this is what we find hard to work out. The Chabanais was a maison de passe in Paris, a brothel, as we would say, and he had this constructed for him. It was called the siège d'amour, the seat of love. And the idea was that he could service, pleasure, have his way with 2 prostitutes at the same time.
Oh.
How this worked, I'm not quite... Well, I say at the same time, I mean that...
With his extra penis.
It does make me worry.
It's a king's penis.
Behold, 2 penises.
It's got stirrups at the top, so there's
It
clearly
has
somebody...
got stirrups. Her legs could go... Well, his.
Is this why Queen Victoria didn't talk to him?
Like
What have you got there now, dear? Your Majesty.
Dirty Bertie, as he was known, quite right. His name was Bertie.
Do you know that wonderful story about he had a long-standing affair with Lily Langtry? Probably it's not true at all, but it is said that he was very cross with her one day, and he said, I've spent enough on you to build a battleship, and she said, you spent enough in me to float one.
So, what did the ancient Greeks use this for?
Yes, go on.
Quick, get your penny out.
Is it this?
No, it isn't. You're not seeing all of it, which is rather unfair of us. You're just seeing the head. It then goes on quite a long way down.
Is it sexual
Then
as well?
something protrudes.
Is it sexual? It
Yes.
is, isn't
Is
it?
it?
Yeah, there you are.
There you go.
Well, you can't...
Well, it doesn't look like much fun.
It doesn't...
He get his bollocks shut in the lift.
They're very few left in good condition, I have to say.
Well, somebody's pulled that one's arms off.
It's the only way he'll learn... The only way he'll learn not to play with himself. These were called herms, as in Hermes, the god. And these were little pillars, or large pillars in some cases, with a phallus on them, and they were rubbed in oil, and then, as you passed one, you'd give it a good fondle. There you are, another one there.
Oh.
To give you good luck.
And where's it from, darling? Where's it?
It's Greece, in the great period of Greece, if you like. In fact, during the Peloponnesian War, in about 415 BC, there was a terrible incident known as the mutilation of the Herms, when they were at war with Sparta, the Athenians, and every single penis had been hacked off.
Yeah.
Oh. And they blamed this on their disastrous expedition to Sicily a little later. It's very, very
Well, it
sad.
changes... I mean, that period of history, the discovery that the penis has anything to do with reproduction changes everything.
There's no
It is the
natural
most-
reason to suppose that the predisposition to pop it in a snug hole somewhere, which is what all humans and animals, we can observe animals doing, and humans have the same predisposition. The idea that 9 months later the thing that pops out of you is connected to it is not a rational one at all.
Nobody had worked that out.
Oh, there are plenty of cultures that haven't worked it out at all until they were
In fact, you get mostly
told.
goddess cultures prior to that, where the woman is revered because she's the one who's producing the new child, and, the men suddenly go, whoa, it's something to do with me, and that ruined the world, actually.
Very good. Now, what's the worst thing you can do with a gimpy gimpy?
Gimpy, gimpy.
Remove her leaf?
Well, that would... she would be upset. It's wipe your bottom. You've missed your spend a penny chance.
Does it do something? Does it make it poisonous or something? Does it do something dreadful to you?
I think poison is... It's kind of poison, but it's sort of worse than that.
Is it full of bugs that crawl up your bum?
It's like, imagine a stinging nettle turned up to the absolutely unbearable max.
Oh. Why would you wipe your bottom with it? Just
well, because it looks a bit like a leaf.
Oh, a
would be
dock
safe
leaf
to.
type thing.
Yeah, dock leafy sort of thing. It's from Queensland, and it has one of the most vicious stings in nature. A brush against it feels apparently like being burnt with hot acid and electrocuted at the same time. Ooh. According to one account, a soldier in the bush in the Second World War was caught short and picked the wrong leaf and found himself in so much pain that he shot himself.
No.
That is a serious... I mean, just the agony of it. One of the first mentions is from 1866. A surveyor reported that his pack horse was stung, got mad and died within 2 hours. Les Moore, a scientific officer with the Queensland government, was stung across the face, ended up looking like Mr. Potato Head, apparently.
I still think it can't be as bad as the toilet paper we had at boarding school.
Izal and Bronco.
I used to write home to my mother on it, airmail letters. That's how bad
Yes,
it was.
it was crispy tissue.
That shiny stuff.
Nothing would stick to it. It was like grease paper. You just think, well,
Why
I've
did they ever
definitely
think-
had a poo, but there's no evidence. Come off on it. It seemed to serve no purpose.
Shall we move along?
Yes. Let's do that. So, you've got to spend a penny round, after all. And if you're caught short in the bush, don't use a gimpy gimpy. You might end up shooting yourself. Now, which football team is the worst in the world at losing major trophies?
Just losing the worst in the world. So it's a team that presumably has never won a game. It should be any team
They've
that
won
never
quite
did.
a lot of games. They've even won trophies.
Have they had the trophy?
But then they've lost them.
They lost.
They've lost them.
Aston Villa?
Very good.
Well, there you go.
You're back in Birmingham
brilliant.
now, and you're being rude, aren't you?
By knowing so much.
How do you know that?
He does a sports programme. He's a...
Yeah, I do. I know, yeah.
I must listen.
Yeah, but in the 1964 FA Cup final, which was won by...
West Ham.
You can see Bobby Moore there. Who was their manager?
At that point, 1964 would have been not Ron.
It was Ron.
It
Ron
was, yeah.
Greenwood, yeah.
Ron Greenwood.
He took it home by tube, discreetly covering it. That lady, she's got her eye on it.
I talked to Jackie Charlton once. Was the centre-half for England when they won the World Cup in 1966. His brother Bobby, of course. And Jack Charlton said that after the World Cup final, he said, myself and Alan Bourne, a few of the lads, we headed to the talk of the town. And he said, I woke up in a couple's house in Dagenham, who I've never seen before or since. And the first thing I did was get my jacket and go, because I still had the World Cup winner's medal in my pocket. We made a few excuses on winning. So it's not unusual in that period.
I love the fact that Bobby Charlton used to have a cigarette at half-time in every match.
There's a wonderful ladies' football team called the Dick Kerr Ladies, and the Dick Kerr Ladies existed for years and years. In fact, during the Second World War, they were the most popular football team, and there was a woman who used to play for them who smoked Woodbines while playing.
Well, Ron Greenwood had good reason to be worried, and that's the point. Football trophies do have a history of going missing. And Aston Villa seem to have been more to blame than anyone else. In 1895, their FA Cup was stolen from the window of a sports shop in Birmingham. And 63 years later, a man called Harry Burge confessed that he had been the man who'd stolen it, and he'd melted it down and made counterfeit half-crown coins. Wow. The second major trophy to have been mislaid by Aston Villa was the European Cup in... what year did
1981.
Yes, they mislaid it in 82. Two members of the... In fact, 82 it would have been, yes. Two members of the team decided to take the cup to a darts match where it disappeared. And many years later, a man called Adrian Reed was identified as the culprit. He took it to a local police station, but it didn't end there because the police decided to have a football match for it. So they kept it so that they could brag about being the European Cup winners. And the FA Cup gets damaged so much every year that it has to get repaired every single year because it gets bashed about in the bath.
I love they've got a pot of tea by the bar.
Yeah.
Yes. My
father-in-law.
brew up.
Very nice.
Well, you always used to see them quite often. You'd see them drinking milk. I mean, that's been an early sponsorship thing. But always after the FA
Bottle
Cup
of milk.
Just remember this now. In the post-match interviews, they'd be standing holding a pint of milk. The last thing you want, actually.
Well, it's probably sponsored by the milk
Yeah, it would have been the milk marketing bowl.
Aston Villa may not have a great record of winning trophies, but they have a rather impressive record of losing them. Speaking of losers, it's time for the lucky dip that is general ignorance. Fingers on buzzers, please. And don't forget that tonight the lowest scorer will be the winner. Which day is added to a leap year? Yeah.
February the 29th.
Yeah, well done, absolutely. No, it isn't.
Right, well, it is. Standing my ground on this one.
Well, what is... They squeeze into the middle of February and add an extra 24th, so then the 24th becomes the 25th, 25th becomes 26th, 26th becomes 27th, 27th becomes 28th, 28th becomes 29th. The reason for that is that the Roman calendar was divided into three. The calends, the nones and the ides, and when it came to discovering, which they did, that a year was actually not 365 days, but 365 days and a quarter, they added it into one of those calendar series. Now, you may say this is just ridiculous. They added 29, but they didn't. And, in fact, the proof of this is that in Denmark, the day on which a woman is allowed to propose to a man is the 24th of February, not the 29th.
So there's an extra day...
That's the reason.
There's an extra day in the middle of February that, apart from Denmark, nobody else has noticed.
Well, the Catholic Church did until the 70s, so it was St. Matthias's Day.
So vicars would go, no, it's the secret day today.
Yeah. St. Matthias's Day was the 24th of February, but on leap years it was the 25th.
I was with you, Alan.
Yeah, I know, quite. But it's good, because he got his extra points.
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah. You see,
You
don't
lucky
forget
bastard,
that.
as it turns out.
The day you add for a leap year is actually February the 24th. In which year did World War II begin?
No more bets, please.
Oh, yes.
1939.
Well, now there, well done.
Coming up on the rails.
Yes, absolutely. Overuse of the whip.
I just want to make sure it's working.
Yes, he's still winning.
Yeah. 39.
He just said that.
I know.
It doesn't work
I was
twice.
just waiting
It's a
to
nice
hear
thought.
why it wasn't.
Well, that's a very Anglo-Franco point of view. Certainly it's when the British and the French joined the war, but before then the Germans had been at war with other countries and the Chinese had been at war with the Japanese. That was a very global sort of event. It spread out, and of course there were alliances and other such things. So you could argue it was 37. You could argue it was 35. You could say the Spanish Civil War with all the international brigades that went in, that was the beginning of the world conflict.
But could it, strictly speaking, be the World War at that point? I mean, how many countries
Some
does
of the
it
World
take?
War.
I
Some
don't
of
know.
them, you know.
It certainly is nothing like the entire globe.
Austria-Hungary is probably not enough.
No.
My father was an MEP, along with Otto von Habsburg, who, had things been different, would have had much more power. My father was watching the football in the common room at the Parliament, and Otto came in and said, "Who's playing?" And my father said, "Austria-Hungary." And he said, "Oh, against whom?"
So Britain joined World War II in 1939, yes, but it had been going on since at least 1937, and arguably since 1935. Could you beat a T-Rex at arm wrestling?
Yes, easily.
Yes, easily.
I finally got one.
Well done. No, even the word easily you got.
Either that's the fastest typist in the world, or I was bang on. I get double points for both.
That's
words.
really very good indeed. No, it may be that in relation to his body, the T-Rex's arms look rather spindly and puny. In fact, they're enormous and powerful, and they are able to lift equivalent to about 400 pounds, whereas the average human being would be about 150 pounds.
That's a double.
Plus, I did once lose an arm wrestle to Boris Johnson.
Did you?
Yeah, lost. Can you believe that? I thought he was all blubber. He's a horse, man.
He's Turkish. You've got Turkish blood in him.
Hugely
Low centre of
strong.
gravity.
We were in a Turkish bath at the time.
So, you were in a Turkish bath.
I wasn't in a Turkish bath. I was just arm wrestling him over who'd vomited most in an F-15 fighter jet. How manly is that?
Yes, I went in a Jaguar, and Hugh Laurie went in one as well. And Hugh is the butchest man you've ever met. He's just extraordinarily athletic, natural athlete. And we each got on this aeroplane. He looked at me, the squadron leader, as he belted me up, and said, yeah, Oh, OK. And I thought, of course, I'll be the one who throws up. And Hugh would be flying, so Hugh would look at me and go, ha, ha, ha. Hugh threw up for the entire journey. And I was completely fine. But the bad bit was when we landed, and I said to the squadron leader, I said, when you were just belting me up, and you looked at me and you went, yeah, OK. What was that about? He said, oh, I didn't want to worry you. He just said that if we had to, you know, use the ejection seat, your kneecaps would have stayed behind. Because my legs were just...
Exactly
you would have the same height.
Exactly the same. In a Hawker Hunter, I would have shot out and the lower half of my legs would have remained in plane.
Because it's a bomb underneath you. It's just, yeah, not a chance. Oh, here we are. Anyway.
God, I was sick. I was supposed to be dropping a laser-guided bomb. And I had these 3 screens, and you have to...
This was a dream.
I kept vomiting all over the screens. And, so, and I missed not just the target, but all of North Carolina with my bomb. I have no idea where it landed to this day. I was sick a lot into their machinery.
Well, despite having mimsy arms, tyrannosaurs were very strong indeed. What is the length of an Olympic swimming pool?
No more race, please.
50 metres.
Oh. 100 metres.
Oh, 50 metres, no. It is counted as 50 metres, but it isn't 50 metres.
50 metres.
According to the Fédération Internationale Natation, de Natation of Swimming.
Those bastards.
The Olympic swimming pools are oversized by a centimetre at each end. Why?
So you don't bash your ankles when you do that spin-turn
No,
thing?
it's not that. What do you need in order to have an Olympic race?
A winning tape.
Well, you need a lap counter and you need something that makes sure that the guy has completed the lap or the girl has but the sensor pad. At each lane, you need one of those, which is a centimetre at each end. What about peeing in the pool? Is that considered a bad thing by Olympic swimmers?
Oh, it is bad. It's very bad, isn't it?
Pooing's right out, but...
I think it doesn't mix with the chlorine, it mixes with the chlorine.
Well, Olympic swimmers are perfectly happy to do it and perfectly happy to admit that they do it. And Michael Phelps, of course, the greatest Olympian of all time in terms of his medal haul, the old bucket hands himself.
Oh, Pissy Phelps.
He says, yeah. He says... Everybody pees in the pool. It's kind of a normal thing to do for swimmers. When you're in the water for 2 hours, we don't really get out to pee. Chlorine kills it.
2 hours? 2-hour races, he been out?
No, but they do actually practice. Well, the fact is, an Olympic-sized swimming pool is actually 2 centimetres longer than you think.
And full of piss.
And full of urine. How old do you have to be to go on a Club 18 to... Oh, that must mean that we've come to the end of the show. Let's look at the scores and see who's tonight's lucky loser. Well. The clear, outright, and extraordinary winner with an amazing -23 is Danny Baker. In second place, with a very, very impressive -5, Jeremy Clarkson. The wrong side of the ledger with +3, Sandy Toksvig. But the joker in a pack of 52 cards. Yes, +52 for Alan Davis. The blue whale was a very bad call. That's all from Sandy, Danny, Jeremy, Alan and me, and I leave you with the last word from actor Edmund Gwenn. When asked if dying was tough, he said, yes, it's tough, but not as tough as doing comedy. Good night.